Good morning, church family. So, a few weeks ago, Neil and I ended up dressing the same. And I think that was on purpose, but I have to say, it is not on purpose that Ray and I are looking the same. Although you look mighty fine. Yeah, look at that. Red and white. We look more like a Christmas theme going on here.
Most people call me Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash, there you go. I think you could pull that off. I'm not sure I could. So, well done, sir. Oh, it is great to be here together this morning, and I'm excited just in the Lord. I can't put a finger on why I'm in a good mood. I'm feeling it. There's a lot of things going. It could be beautiful outside, and that puts a lot of people like, man, yesterday was the start of soccer. That could be it. My soccer girls did great, so that may be the excitement, or it just may be being here. It just could be part of the fellowship, and I'm thankful for whatever the cause is. I am thankful for y'all joining together in the worship and being here together. But have you ever felt those times whenever you're not as thankful, or it's just tough? It's hard to be in the middle of a place hoping for seeing the end in sight, but it's nowhere to be found. If you've been on Highway 75 recently? Have you realized how long some projects take? Have you ever tried to start something and make the finish closer than they should be? I can't tell you how many times, if you've ever been in construction, Highway 75, did you know construction on that started in 2020? I could have sworn, like for the vamping of it, I could have sworn that was 1920 whenever it started. I could be wrong, but I keep on hoping that one day I will see it before I die, the finished project, and I really hope that that's just a joke. But can you imagine a project that started before you were born, you have watched it develop your whole life, and you will never see the end of that project? Can you imagine something like that? This seems ludicrous in our mind of how fast-paced things might go. But there are those projects around. I want to just give you a few construction projects with that. How many of you know what that is? All right, you may be more familiar with another angle of this. This is Notre Dame in Paris. Now, how many of you have been to Notre Dame? Okay, I know there's a handful of us here. That's wonderful. It is an impressive architectural feat of how they built it and whatever, all the things that happened. It started construction in the year 1163. Okay? It finished construction in 1345. 182 years. So there were not only the architect of this, but plenty of other people living in Paris around this time that watched this building being erected, being built up, and they never saw it completed. That is crazy to think about in my mind. And you may be thinking, well, yeah, stuff like that would never happen again. Because we can build things so much quicker now. And we're going to spend, like, if we need to go build a wall, if we need to go build whatever, probably shouldn't have said wall because y'all jumped right to political. I'm sorry. I was going to Great Wall of China, kind of, which is also political, but that's another idea. But if we need to build something, we know that we can just go get it done. And in today's world, construction might go faster than 182 years. Maybe. How many of you have been to Barcelona? In Barcelona, there is a cathedral called the Sagrada Familia. And I probably butchered the name of that, but got nervous coming into it. It began work in 1882, and it is scheduled to finish in the next 5 years. That's impressive, right? And it's really a fascinating piece of architecture. If you want to go look up pictures of this, like there's some weird stuff, because all cathedrals are weird. I'm just going to be honest. There's a lot of weird stuff that happens. The gargoyles, angels, demons, fights, all crazy things in the architecture, but it's really fascinating to hear the stories. But there will be a spire that goes through the middle of those four right there that goes higher than those four whenever it's all said and done. And it is massive, and it is amazing. And there are people that started that project that never got to see it done? And sometimes that's how I feel about things in this life. I feel like there are two moments in which the life of a project are exciting. And it's the beginning of a project and the end of a project. The time that the first shovel of dirt is taken, signifying we are building here, to the ribbon cutting at the end. Those two things are fantastic and exciting moments. Just recently, I was going back through a lot of the Western Heights history, and I ran across the pictures of this building being built. And it's really fascinating to see how much people have changed, how they look differently. Like even Richard up here this morning, he looks a little bit different. Still Abraham Lincoln-esque, but a little less gray. And I was like, there's Richard, no doubt. Like that was 1992-ish, maybe one-ish whenever it started. Someone can correct me on that. But really cool to see that. And then we've been in this building now for 30 years, and it seems so long ago, yet not so long ago. Those two endpoints are what's exciting about a building in any kind of project, the life of a project. You know what's not exciting? In the middle. In the middle of any project is so difficult. And it's so hard because you just want to get to the end. You want to see it come to fruition. You want to see the end of this. And in our lives, this is so much more true. When you're going through the valley of the shadow of death, you just want to see an end to it. You just want it to be over. Can we pass through this, Lord? So last week we started a series on contemplating the power and the importance of Psalm 23. Because I believe that Psalm 23 is reminding us that when you are in the middle of whatever's going on, God is still good. And it is a reminder of the struggle that it is to grind in the middle of the mess, to continue moving forward in it all. So let's read this psalm. Psalm 23 is from the English Standard Version. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So we see in the first verse here, David declares that he has no needs because the Lord is my shepherd. And then in the last verse, we see that goodness and mercy are going to follow me all the days of my life. What that means, if we squish those two ideas for the beginning and the end together, is when the Lord is your shepherd, he follows you all the days of your life. Our shepherd is always behind us. Now, he is kind of turning the misery and mess that we have in our lives into this miracles and the mercy that are given to humanity. Now, often we're talking about the importance of following Jesus, that we need to follow him, but sometimes we forget that Jesus and God is not really bound by time and space as we might consider. So as we're following him, he's also following us. And it's kind of a beautiful image when you think about it, because he's weaving blessing and beauty out of the sorrow and suffering that we're leaving in our wake. And sometimes whenever you think about that for a moment, you can look back upon your life and you can go, wow, yeah, I can see what God has done in the wake of the mess of the life that I have created. Like, God has done some amazing things, but sometimes you look back there and go, how far back is he? Because whenever I look back right behind me, I'm seeing the mess and I'm not seeing any beauty out of it. And I can also look back to some years and go, where is God in that? Where is God showing up in that mess? And sometimes I'm just too short-sighted to see it. Because there are times in my life whenever I look back and I thank God that he did not answer that prayer, or as theologian Garth Brooks would say, I thank God for unanswered prayers. I have to say he's slightly wrong because there's always answered prayers. Sometimes the answer is no, you idiot. And sometimes that's the answer, and I thank God for that. Sometimes whenever he didn't give me what I wanted, I can look back now and go, whew, I'm glad he didn't. He knew what he was doing, and I didn't. But there's some things that I look at behind me, and I'm like, God, what in the world was happening here? Why did you not fix that? Why haven't you redeemed that? Why haven't you made that into something beautiful? And I'm talking about years in the making, right? Why doesn't God show up in all of it? I hope that you will always be able to see God's reasoning and his working in your life. But that's not always going to be the case. So I pray that instead you have the faith that David has, that David had with this writing of this psalm, that reminds us that God's goodness and mercy will always follow you. Even when you can't see it. Even whenever it doesn't seem like it's coming, it is always following. I want to illustrate what David is saying here by looking at the life of someone who probably inspired David. The life of a man named Joseph. Now, most of you probably know his story, but we're going to walk through his whole story in this one sermon. So get comfortable, all right? I will abbreviate as much as I can, all right? But I will hit the highlights of the story of Joseph. Joseph was the son of Jacob, who was the son of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. So Joseph is the great-grandson of Abraham. He is the 11th of 12 sons born to Jacob, and as we all know how the story goes, he is daddy's favorite. He is the favored child, and that really has nothing to do with Joseph in and of himself. It has everything to do with who his mom was. That this was the mom that Jacob loved most. Now this is highlighted most clearly in the story whenever Jacob gives Joseph the coat of many colors. Now, literal in Hebrew, we all kind of have this image of what that might look like, what that might mean. In Hebrew, the term is actually coat of long sleeves, which is kind of interesting. I'm like, aren't coats supposed to have long sleeves? Like a vest, I get that, but this is a coat of many colors. Shouldn't it have long sleeves? Well, what's going on is it is highlighting and indicating one important thing about Joseph. Joseph didn't have to work. You see, coat of long sleeves meant I am not in the workforce. I am treated as royalty. And that's what his dad was doing to him. So even if you view it as coat of many colors, which I think is also accurate in understanding, it is setting him apart from his brothers in such a way that they are going to get upset. And if it wasn't enough that he got this beautiful garment and he didn't have to work as much, then this same punk kid, according to his brothers, starts having dreams that one day the brothers are going to bow down to him. Now, I don't know how many youngest siblings I have in the room this morning. I'm one of those youngest siblings. If I were to say one day to my siblings, you're going to go bow down to me, that's not going to go over very well. Not in any situation is that going to go over very well. I'm going to just reverse it. If my older sister or my older brother were to say the same thing to me, I would be like, yeah, right, make me. And you know that those are the conversations going on. This is the little brother who is years younger than some of the other brothers, and he's saying, yeah, one day I had this dream. I'm pretty sure what this dream means is you're going to bow down to me. Well, obviously that just gets the angst of the older brothers. One day, Jacob calls Joseph to say, hey, go check on your brothers out in the field, tending the flocks. Fascinating side note, Joseph is not working. He's wearing his coat of long sleeves of the many colors. It is signifying that he doesn't have to be out in the fields. Jacob says, hey, go check on them. So he goes off in his coat, signifying, I'm not having to work, to go to his older brothers who are having to work. Can you just imagine this tension? A long ways away, the brothers see him, and they decided they've had enough of this dreamer, and they decided, hey, we need to get rid of him. shortening it up, what they ended up doing is they sell him into slavery. They make a little coin off of their brother, sell him into slavery, and now, through no fault of his own, Joseph finds himself the slave to an Egyptian man named Potiphar. It is here that we encounter a phrase in Scripture that's very important to the life of Joseph. Genesis 39:2. It says, the Lord was with Joseph. Now, I'd be tempted to say, really? I mean, if this is what the Lord being with you looks like, can I try a different path, Lord? Because right now, Joseph has been pampered at home, but been frustrated by his brothers. And then it comes to the point where his brothers try to kill him. One brother at least steps up to say, let's not kill him because, that would be bad. Let's just get rid of him by selling him and tell Dad that we killed him. Because lying is better than killing, at least in their minds, right? And so that's what they go for. And you would think, how is God with Joseph in all of this story? Because if God was walking with Joseph, wouldn't he have protected him? Wouldn't have he given him another dream to say, hey, you know what? On second thought, let's not go to your brothers because they're plotting something. Go back to your dad and say, hey, Dad, I'll do this if you come with me. Like, wouldn't that be how the Lord works? That's how we want the Lord to work. The Lord was with Joseph. Continue reading in this. Here's what it says. Potiphar realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. It goes on to say he literally was in charge of everything except Potiphar's wife. That's it. He didn't concern himself with anything because Joseph had the Midas touch. Anything that he touched was turned into gold. It was good. And so it seems like the Lord was with Joseph. It seems that surely goodness and mercy are following Joseph wherever he goes. In the wake of the mess that his brothers put him in the pit of despair that he was pulled out of to be sold, it seems like goodness and mercy are following him. And then enters Potiphar's wife. Here comes woman. She's attracted to this young Hebrew man, who the writer of Genesis says is Joseph is both handsome in form and appearance. It's interesting, and it says that too. It's basically the Hebrew way saying he's got a cute face and a pretty jacked body. He is fine, all right? However you want to describe that, this is the guy that everyone is like, hey, if I had posters up on my bedroom wall, it was of Joseph, all right? All the girls had that. They had all the things, like it was Joseph because he was fine in form and appearance. And this does not get lost on Mrs. Potiphar. So one day, Mr. Potiphar is out doing this military stuff because he's in charge of those types of things. Mrs. Potiphar comes in doing her walk like an Egyptian thing, whatever it is that's trying to attract the young man. And her routine in that she propositions Joseph. Now, it's really fascinating. It says, only recorded words that she says to him is, lie with me, which has got to be one of the most blunt pickup lines ever. Because let me translate it directly from Hebrew. Sex now. That's what she says. It's not any kind of question. It is very much a you, me, now. That is so blunt. And if you got to be in Joseph's shoes in this moment, you got to know the temptation is there. Because Potiphar's not going to marry just any old girl. He's going to marry some of the best in the kingdom because he was that kind of elite person. And so whenever she propositions him, Joseph doesn't have anything to do with it. It may have been temptation, but he's staying away from it. He tells her two reasons he's staying away. One, it was be against the laws of God. It would be against God to do this. And two, you're married. I don't think Mr. Potiphar would like this very much. It would go against my relationship with him. We're not doing this. Well, she kept on and kept on and kept on trying to get him until one time they ended up being alone together. She grabs a hold of his coat. Now it's not a coat of many colors, but it probably still had some long sleeves. Grabbed a hold of it. He shed off his coat and ran away. She is trying to sexually assault him. And then as the story goes, she accuses him of the rape. Mr. Potiphar believes that for whatever reasons. And because of that, Joseph is thrown into jail. And then we come across this phrase in the story of Joseph again. It says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love." Now again, you're like, really? I mean, I could see God being with Joseph whenever he is now in charge of Potiphar's house. And man, yeah, the Lord is blessing him. Why didn't the Lord stop Potiphar's wife? Why didn't he stop the accusations? Why didn't he interfere? Well, maybe the Lord is doing some things as you walk through the valley of the shadow of death that you just can't see until you're on the other side. And so we find that as we continue the story, he's in prison. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners over everything that happened in prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. So even in prison, even through the valley of the shadow of death for Joseph, goodness and mercy are following him. It is here in this prison that he meets two guys that formerly worked for the Pharaoh, the baker and the butler. And they both have dreams. Joseph hears about this and says, "Hey, I know a God that can interpret dreams. He did it for me. I had a couple dreams he interpreted. Didn't end up great yet. Got me sold into slavery. But let me hear your dreams." So they share the dreams. They're similar dreams, but different ends in mind. The butler is going to be restored back to service for Pharaoh, and the baker is not. He's going to die. Joseph asks the butler, "Hey, when you go back to Pharaoh, remember me. Bring my case before Pharaoh because I'm here on a false accusation." And you have no doubt that the butler says, "Yeah, no problem, #never forget, I got you, bro." And he forgets. It's almost as soon as he gets back to Pharaoh, he forgets about Joseph until Pharaoh begins to have a dream. Now, it's a weird dream. He dreams that 7 fat cows come out of the Nile, and then 7 skinny cows come up and eat the fat cows, and then they raise up a sign to Pharaoh that says, "Eat more chicken." Now, that's not exactly what happened. That's what my brain wants to say happens. But what ends up happening is everyone goes, the skinny cows eat the fat cows, and that's it. And everyone's like, what's the point? What's going on here? No one knows. And it's somewhere along that storyline that the butler goes, "Hey, wait a minute. I remember a guy that in prison told an explanation to a dream that I have. I wonder if he's still alive." So they go check the prison. They find out Joseph's there. They clean him up and bring Joseph before Pharaoh. Joseph not only tells Pharaoh what the dream means, but then he has the audacity to give Pharaoh advice. He begins to tell Pharaoh, what you should do is this. You should, during the 7 years of plenty, you should appoint someone that is in charge of that to collect a certain amount during those time of plenty so that it is enough for the famine that is coming. Pharaoh is moved, not only by the understanding and the explanation of the dream, but just the fact that Joseph says, "Here's what you need to do next." And Pharaoh says, "Who better to do this than the man who came up with the plan?" And so shortly after, he puts Joseph as the prime minister of Egypt, second in command. And it seems that we can look back again and say, surely goodness and mercy was following Joseph. I mean, through all the hills and valleys of Joseph's story, we come to it, and he is now the highest promotion that he could ever get. Egypt is the most powerful land in the world at this time. And Joseph is there at the top of it. But there's a long-range outlook happening here about the goodness of God that I want to hit before we close out. About 10 years after this, the famine has now really taken havoc upon the land. Joseph's family, back in Israel, in the land of Canaan, they're out of food. So Jacob sends 10 of his sons to Joseph, not knowing it's to Joseph, but to Egypt, to buy grain. They go to Joseph. Joseph recognizes them immediately, but they don't recognize him. He is brokenhearted with this because he's trying to figure out, I love my family, yet here's what they did to me. How do I do this? So he gives them a series of tests to see if are they really the same brothers or have they learned from their mistakes? Have they changed? He finds out through it that they've really changed. And at one point, he just can't take it anymore. And so he takes off his headdress and he cries before his brothers and says, "It is me, Joseph, your brother." And when the brothers realize this, they freak out because this is now the second most powerful man in the face of the earth. And he could exact his revenge right now. And no one would bat an eye. There is no higher court to be called to. Joseph could do it. But here's what Joseph says. Don't be upset. Don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. Then a little bit later, after Jacob, Joseph's father, dies, the brothers are like, okay, maybe he just was saying that for the sake of daddy. And they come and beg for mercy again. And here's what Joseph says in chapter 50. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. God intended it for good. How long do you have to wait in your story to be able to look back to the first problem, the first infraction, the first thing that broke you, and be able to say, God intended that for good? It took most of Joseph's life to get there. It took most of the brother's life to understand that. And sometimes that's the same for us. God intended it for good sounds strikingly similar to what David would years later pen. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. See, both Joseph and David understood that the goodness of God follows them wherever they go because they are going with God. When the Lord is your shepherd, goodness and mercy are going to follow you. That doesn't mean that everything that you're going through is good. It just means that God can use it for His good because God is good. Even in the wake of your mess, God's mercy is at work. But you got to wait on the Lord. You got to let the Lord do His work. Let Him do His mercy. Because when you find yourself dictating mercy, you find yourself on the wrong side of what it really means. See, you can't dictate mercy. All you can do is receive it. And so you got to wait on the Lord for His mercy to show up in your life. So I don't know where you are in the story of the valleys or the mountaintops that you're going through, but I know this. If you look back at all and think, where has God been? I don't know why this has happened to me. I don't know what was going on in my past. I don't even know what is going on in my present. I want you to trust that David and Joseph had some truth for you this morning. That God is good all the time. And it doesn't matter what you're going through right now. His goodness and mercy are following you. And you may never see the final end of that project that is working in your life. You may be dead and gone before His goodness and mercy takes full effect. But for those of us that believe that this is not all of life here on this earth, in this physical body, we are good with that because we know that ultimately God's goodness and mercy is going to overflow in such a way that it's going to overwhelm me, and my cup will overflow. So this morning, if you just need prayers because you're in the middle of the mess, or if you need help waiting on the Lord. Elders and ministers would love to pray with you and continue to pray for you. We'll be around this auditorium. Come find one of us and let us know as we stand and sing together.